Hello my friends, welcome back to another video. This is going to be a long one for you. It's going to be the most detailed, and it's going to be on a project that is definitely the best project I've ever made. It's on a knife block and 3 knives with sayas that go into the knife block and are removable. They have matching symbols, and I could not be prouder of it. I think it turned out super beautiful and functional and just all around really cool. It's gonna be the most detailed video I've ever made. That being said, I didn't include the knife making process, sadly. There will be some shots on the handle making. Other than that, it'll just mainly be on the sayas and the block and the symbols. So I hope you enjoy. Also, as you can see, I am in a new country. I'm back to my roots in Sweden. I got shoulder surgery, and so I'll be out of the game for at least 6, maybe 7 months. But then I will be making more content for you guys, for all my fans. The first thing that we're going to be working on here is the bolsters. These are made out of bronze, which is a great knife making material. It's beautiful. There are lots of different finishes you can put on it. It engraves really nicely, and it also ages super well. What I mean by it ages super well is that it oxidizes to this like nice, almost brownish color where it's not frequently handled, and then where you do touch it all the time, it polishes up to this super nice, almost gold color. Right here you can see I'm looking down and peeking with one eye pretty frequently, and I'm just checking to make sure that both sides are perfectly symmetrical, and then we can move on to rounding and sanding. Now I like to use files to bring my bolsters into its final profile. I think it's a part of the knife that you handle really frequently, so I want it to be perfect, and I just find that I have a little bit more control with files than a grinder. That being said, I did get it rough profiled in with the grinder. There you can see I got it all finished up with the files. Now the next step is moving on to sanding, and you can see I'm using this cork-backed hand sanding stick. It's a little tool that I made. A lot of knife makers use it, and the cork just gives this slight little give, and it's great for non-flat surfaces like this bolster, and it just leaves a super nice even surface finish. Now, this opinion is probably not shared by all and may be slightly controversial, but I think that my favorite part, or one of my favorite parts about making knives, is actually making the tools for the knives. I just think it's so cool, like making a specialty tool to solve a problem that you have in knife making, and then having it actually work out and just be super helpful. I just think that's so satisfying. A perfect example of that is this little piece of leather that I slap on top of the vise. It's super basic and super simple, but so helpful. It just has a little slot cut in it, and it means that I can bang this bolster off of the knife without marring the top of the bolster whatsoever. And when you're taking the bolster on and off hundreds of times when you're making these knives, it's a massive help. One of the most major components of knife making, or I don't know, a huge part of knife making, is order of operations. And I mean, there's lots and lots of different ways that you can do it, and everyone's different. The order of operations I prefer, at least when it comes to the handle and the blade, is I like to get the handle fully finished and then fully finish the blade. That being said, as you can see, the knife here is finish profiled, and the sides of it are, at least in the finger choil area, up to 800 grit. That just means that the knife is much easier to hold. It means that I have flat references, and it also means that I have to maintain an 800 grit finish on the blade, because if it wasn't at an 800 grit finish and I had to still hand sand it, I would remove material, making the slot in the bolster oversized and leaving gaps, and that's not acceptable. So it makes it a little more complicated, but it also means that I can have flat references, which is huge for scribing little lines like this. which is super useful for laying things out, especially when it comes to making your handle in line with your blade, as well as just decorative things like we're about to do. It essentially is just super useful for making reference lines and making symmetrical things on your knife and keeping things straight and even. The only drawback is I have to maintain an 800 grit finish back in the choil area, which is a little challenging and just means that I have to cushion the vise with leather and just be a little more careful. So that was really hard to explain, and I'm not sure if it made any sense. But here we're moving on to some decorative stippling on the bolster, and I'd never done this before. I basically just turned a center punch into this little dimpling tool, and I'm using this brass hammer that I made back in high school, and we're just basically going to put a bunch of little dimples all over this bolster, and hopefully it looks cool. Now, like I said, I'd never done this before, so in the beginning it took a pretty long time. I just had to go super slow, especially on this initial line right here, because I wanted it to be like a mix between a perfect surface finish and this dimpled surface finish. I just think that contrast would look really cool. But I had to go super slow and be careful not to go outside of that line, and also make sure that it was, a nice even straight line, which is much easier said than done when you're just putting dents in metal, especially on this rounded surface. I basically had to match the angle because glancing blows looked really ugly. I could go back and forth and kind of clean it up if I messed up. But it ended up being a bit challenging and definitely took me a very long time. So as you can see here, as I got a little more brave and confident, it started speeding up a bit. This still was probably about a half an hour to 20 minutes of denting this thing, I guess. One of the challenges I was having was lighting this thing up, just because my fingers would get in the way and make these weird shadows. But here you can see I got the initial lines laid out on it, and I think they turned out pretty good. Here I'm just filling in the space in between those lines and just doing a lot of space filling, I guess. I actually ended up enjoying this process by the end. Other than my neck being super sore, it was super satisfying just putting lots of little dents in it, and I got into a good rhythm. And yeah, it was actually quite meditative and fun. So I ended up deciding to put a little more stippling in the top of the bolster. I just thought it flowed a little bit better that way. But in this next step here, pay attention to the tooling and also the pitch change. So another basic tool but essential for driving bolsters on, I like to have mine compression fit. And so it's just a little pipe with a piece of leather with a slot in it. And it just means that I can drive that bolster on and get it fully seated every time. And did you notice the pitch change from when it was off the knife a little ways to when it finally got seated? You could just hear it solidify. Anyway, now that we got that layout ink off, check out how pretty that bolster was. The stippling left behind some little raised parts that I didn't think felt super good, so I just took the cork back sanding stick with I think some 800 grit and just brought those little sharp edges down and just made everything look a little more refined. So the next step here is the bluing process, and it's pretty simple. After getting everything all sanded up and to the finish that I like, I just cleaned it off with some acetone, and this right here is gun bluing, and I love what gun bluing does to bronze. It turns it this like deep brown gold, and I just think it's so beautiful. So now that these are all gun blued up, I'm just taking some sunshine cloth or jewelry polishing cloth, whatever you want to call it, It's just a super fine polishing cloth, and it just takes off a little bit of that oxidization that the gun bluing gave it and gives it almost this cool, old, rustic look to it, which I thought was super nice. And as you can see, I made 3 of these things, so that process that you saw, I had to do 3 times. As is with most of the steps in this process that we're going to do, I'll probably only show it for one, just so that it's not repeating the same thing that you've already seen. So sadly, I didn't film any of the rest of the process for the knives. It was essentially me learning how to engrave with a graver chisel and hammer, learning how to make graver chisels, learning how to sharpen them. I eventually kind of sort of got it figured out. Here's the butt cap, got that engraved. It took me 3 days to make the silver curved bits fit properly, as well as the silver butt cap curves fit properly. That took me probably a week in total just to do the fit up, let alone the shaping and polishing and engraving. So it took a really long time there, and there was also a lot of confusion in the order of operations on how I could do that best, especially with the butt cap and the assembly of the knife. I ended up gluing on the butt caps, was the very last thing I did. But that was a challenge for me to figure out. Anyway, now we're moving on to the sayas. As you can see there, I took a long piece of walnut with this cool almost red stripe going down half of it and separated by a little bit of gray, which led to some challenges with grain matching. I wanted this to look as close as I could to one piece of wood, even though it was 3. And so best way I could think to do that was just like we do with Damascus, which is called doing like an accordion flip, basically. So you basically just fold one piece in half and then fold the other piece in half to that, and you go so on and so forth. A little complicated to explain. Anyway, now we're moving on to cutting out the profile of the knife. So I just traced the knife onto there, cut it out with a bandsaw, and then did a little cleanup work. It ended up that there was this super thin piece of wood on the very end of that centerpiece, which is fine because it'll be supported eventually when I glue this up. But just for now, I had to get it cleaned up after the bandsaw, and so I had to be super careful with it here. So again, just not to bore you guys and to save a little bit of time recording, I only filmed the process of 1 saya being made, but again, I had to do this for 3 sayas in total, so 2 others after this. So just keep that in mind through this build through. Another thing I had to be careful with here was squeeze out. I knew I had to do kind of the minimal amount of wood glue I could possibly do. Just try and minimize the amount of squeeze out because that would interfere with the knife fit in the saya because it was a pretty perfect fit. That being said, I put too much glue, had some squeeze out, and had to fix that. So you get to see that process later on in the video. It sucked. So while we wait for those sayas to finish gluing up, I thought I would move on to making the retaining pins for them. And I thought making some brass heads to the pins would look super cool and accompany the bronze bolster super well. So I found some old leftover brass round stock by the little tiny lathe we have at the shop and turned some little pin heads for them. So I know that last clip was pretty boring and slow, but I was just trying to give you guys some perspective as to how long this took me. I had little experience with this lathe. I've used metal lathes in the past, but never one this small. And yeah, it was very slow going in the beginning. those first two initial cuts is about how slow this entire process was. So it took me a pretty long time. I think I was at this lathe for about 2 hours or something, just getting these rough shaped. Then I moved over to some files, and those I'm much more accustomed to using, and that went pretty quick. And yeah, now the Sayas are drying, we can move back onto them. So as you can see here, because of the glue squeeze out, none of these were fitting into the Saya correctly. So I had to take a handle broach that I made a while back and grind it down a little bit thinner just to fit in and be the blade thickness, and just cleaned as much of that squeeze out as I could. That being said, I had to go back after a while, make another tool to get the very tip on one of them, and that really sucked. Anyway, we got them fitting pretty close now. I'm moving on to profiling and a little bit of cleanup work. After getting those glue joints cleaned up and all the crustaceans off of it, I am tracing the knife blade onto the Saya where it sits in the Saya. That way I know how close I can get to the borders of that middle piece without going through and creating a hole. So once we've got all three knives traced onto there, we're going to do the final shaping on the grinder of these Sayas, and then move on to the next step. So not quite a exact perfect fit up yet, but we'll do the final tuning of those later. Now I'm moving back onto the brass heads for the Saya pins. And I'm just doing some final cleanup work here and getting them down to these little thin nubbins and ready to be cut into pieces. So as I've already said, a major theme throughout this entire project was just trying new things, the largest of which was engraving. I'd never done it before. I had tried once when I was like 10, and the graver chisel was way too big, the head was way too big, all my angles were totally off when I sharpened it. So I watched a bunch of YouTube videos and figured a file would be a suitable steel, so I found an old triangle file and Googled images of what graver chisels are supposed to look like, chose one, and then just tried until it worked. I mainly just practiced on some bronze scraps that I had, and that worked pretty well. And then eventually, once I felt more confident, moved on to the silver parts and elements. But every engraving step was super stressful because I had probably an hour into these 3 knobs already. And if I messed up the engraving, I would have to scrap them and start over again. So it's kind of like a very committing maneuver. Here you can see that triangle file I was talking about that I sharpened. So yeah, I kind of just like, in the beginning especially, I'd have to like warm up. So I would like practice on the bronze cutoffs. Eventually, by the end of this project, I got a little more confident, and yeah, it felt better, but it was still very stressful every time. And just like that, we're moving on to the knife block. I forgot to film this process, so here you can see my hand explanation. We cut off a chunk of that walnut right there. Oh, not the planer yet. We got over here to the joiner, fed the edge over the joiner a couple times to clean that up. Okay. Then we came over here to the planer and cleaned up the flats of the board and just got ourselves a nice chunk of walnut ready to be cut into 2 pieces, which is what we're doing here with the chop saw. As you can see, it's a pretty big chunk of walnut. It's super beautiful, and I was super excited about this step in the process. Here I'm marking the 2 pieces that were joined together originally, right? So before this was split into 2, where they were joined together. And that just means that I can grain match, as you'll see here. You can flip the 2 pieces, and because they were split right next to each other, they should mirror each other super well, and it looks super beautiful. And in the end, the goal is to make this look like it came from one piece of walnut, just like the Sayas. And I think it worked out pretty well, but you'll see in the final product. That step that you saw there was cleaning up the edges of the Saya, getting them up to their final finish so that I knew exactly how big they were going to be so that we could start slotting out this block. The idea with this thing was to have Sayas, as in sheaths for kitchen knives, made out of wood, that go into a knife block and then are removable so that you can take the knives places if you're a traveling cook or whatever, or just don't want the block. I don't know. I think it looks pretty cool, but you could put the knives in a drawer if you're living in a small house or something, don't have a lot of counter space. I don't think anyone who's going to be buying this won't have a lot of counter space, but anyway, you could do it if you wanted to. So what you saw there was me routering out the shape of the Saya, and it fit up pretty well. You'll see later on in the process that did not work, and I had to restart. Anyway, now we're moving on to drilling the holes for the pins, and I had to do this first because I did not want the Sayas to go below where the pins go in the block. That was a terrible way of explaining that. I didn't want the pinholes to be below the surface of the block, so I had to drill those first, and the pins had to slightly interfere with the knife so that the knife didn't rattle around in the Saya. So it has to be kind of a precise location. I just traced the knife ricasso onto the Saya and then drilled a hole there, which I know probably doesn't make a lot of sense unless you know things about knives. But anyway, that's what we're doing now. And I stuffed a little piece of walnut in between the 2 just to prevent tear out in that gap there. And here you can see the 3 pins installed into the Sayas. We're getting close. Now I am sanding the faces of the Sayas, and reason being is I had to get those fully finished before I knew not only the profile of them, but also the thickness, because these I wanted to be an interference fit with the block as well. I didn't want any wobble in them. I just thought that would feel cheap. I wanted them to slide in and be super tight and have 0 wobble. I also put a slight taper into them, which is why you saw me using those calipers. And that just means that they would slide in easily initially and then solidify it the further in they went, right? Like a wedge shape, essentially. I'll let you enjoy these satisfying shots of putting some finish on them now. So yeah, I fucked up. I had all 3 slots routed out. It took me like half of a day, and the final step was getting the surface completely flat on the walnut and ready to be glued up. And the granite block with sandpaper on it had a little chunk of epoxy, and it absolutely wreaked havoc on the on the corners of the Saya slots. So I had to plane off all the work that I had done that day. Thankfully, the blocks were thick enough to where I could plane both blocks down about 1/4 of an inch or so, a little bit more, just past the groove that I had routed in. I had to do it to both blocks because otherwise the grain wouldn't mirror properly. Anyway, I'm kind of glad that it did happen because I ended up using a different technique that my friend and coworker taught me, where you clamp the Saya to the block, use a razor blade to sever the grain, router out a slot close to your line, and then chisel on your line. And it was a way more precise way of doing things, and was fun. I got to learn something new. And yeah, I'm super happy with how it turned out. So all in all, it was a win-win, other than the fact that I wasted a day, but that's fine. Anyway, here you can see I did 1 pass on every slot, not at full depth, just because that is a lot to take off with the router and still be precise. And then I did a final pass with the router at the perfect depth, just slightly bigger than the Saya thickness. And again, went up to that line and then just cleaned it up with a chisel again. And this process was super fun and very satisfying, and it turned out great. And you'll see the shots of that in a minute. So not only was the knife and chisel process more satisfying and quiet and peaceful, and I got to use my hands and didn't have to use a machine, but also ended up somehow almost being faster, because I just had to go straight to the line, and then it fit up pretty much perfect with just a little bit of cleanup work. But I think it took probably half the time that the routering took, just because I could be pretty sloppy with the router, and then the chisel was super easy to be precise with. So win-win again. And would you look at that, the genius glued new sandpaper onto the granite block. What a smart guy. So here I got the 2 pieces just clamped together and doing a test fit up with all 3 Sayas, and check out how satisfying this is. Yeah. Oh. Oh. So I wanted to have dowel pins securing these 2 blocks together so that I was 100% sure that they would be in the right spot when I went to glue them together, and just to have a more solid glue up because wood does tend to move and I didn't want these 2 blocks splitting apart. My way, or my solution of that, was to glue a piece of scrap HPL in between, or on the piece of wood, drill the holes in it, and then flip it onto the other block to make sure that the dowel pins were in the correct spot on the other one. It was just my method. I don't think it's the best way of doing it. I'm sure there's people have better ways of doing it, but that's what I did, and it worked out pretty well. As you can see there, on the glue up, I was again trying to get as little squeeze out into the block as I possibly could. I also beeswaxed the Saya slots just in case some glue did get in there. It'd be easy to scrape out. But we got the 2 blocks glued together, and there ended up being little to no glue line, and I was super happy with how it turned out. And now, the next day, we're moving on to cleaning up the edges and the exciting stuff for this block. Okay, so I've been in Sweden for about a month now, and I've been telling myself since I left the valley, oh yeah, once I get on the plane, like I'll do all the recording in the airport, like the voiceover recording, because I hate voiceover recording. I just like feel like I suck at it, which makes sense because I've only done it like on 2 or 3 videos now. But anyway, I'm switching it up mid-video here because I've been like tweaking about it for the last month, and I've been like, oh, like I want it to be like a high quality product, and I want it to be like, you know, I want to have entertaining and good information in there, and I like want them to know what's happening in the video. But it's gotten to the point where I'm tweaking about it so hard that I just literally haven't done anything. So I don't know how the voiceover has been for you guys in the rest of the video, but I'm switching up tactics here. I'm out on a walk, and I'm just gonna basically rant and maybe explain some stuff in the video if I think it needs explaining. I think that might be more interesting. I think it's just gotten to the point where I basically just need to, or it hasn't gotten to the point. I think what needs to happen is I just need to talk to the camera a bunch and do a bunch of voiceovers and just practice, basically. I don't think the content matters so much. There's this guy on YouTube called Jesse Wu or Who or something. Anyway, he's like another knife maker, bladesmith dude, and he, I think, does really good voiceovers, and I love the content that he includes in them. And I think he's got like, you know, the nice voice, not in like a gay way or anything, but he has like, it's nice content to watch, and he gets a lot of views. His channel grew like insanely fast too. It's pretty cool. But he's got, you know, a filmer and I'm sure an editing setup and all that. And I just got like my iPhone. So we're kind of bare bones here, not to make excuses or anything, but that's just not me, you know. But every time I watch his videos, I just like tweak because I'm like, oh man, his content's so good. Like, how do I make my content like his? And I think it's less so to do with like, oh, trying to make it's good to draw inspiration from people, but I also just like want to be my own person and my own channel, and I just don't really know what that looks like yet, so I'm just gonna kind of throw myself at it and see what happens, I guess. Anyway, I haven't been watching the video. I've been trying not to slip on the ice, but here we're making some little brass coins, I guess you could call them, and they are gonna be symbols to show where the sayas go in the block, because we have 3 different knife shapes, 3 different sayas, and as I pointed out earlier, they're custom thicknesses, different tapers, different shapes, and they're perfect fits. And we want that to be easy for when Joe Schmo buys this thing. Joe Schmo. Someone already bought this, by the way. So thank you to whoever that was. I don't know who that was. They'll probably never find this video. Maybe I'll get Nuis to send the video to them. Anyway, Joe Schmo, not to be offensive, I have no clue what your name is. I'm incredibly grateful for you purchasing this block, and I hope that you enjoy it, and maybe someday we could chat about it. I'd love to meet and talk with you about it, because I'm super proud of it. Anyway, we got these coins rounded out, shaped up, and now we can move on to finishing them and then engraving them. So remember how you don't remember, you haven't seen it yet, but the butt caps of these knives have 3 different symbols on them. One is some Japanese-esque style clouds, or at least that's what I was going for. I kind of fumbled a little bit, but they still turned out okay. It was my least favorite of the 3. Anyway, the tree one is my favorite one. I think it's turned out super elegant. It's almost like Lord of the Rings elvish kind of coolness, you know? And then we have the other fire, sparky looking one, which arguably also my favorite. Can't have 2 favorites. I don't know. I think the tree is a little cooler, but those 2 are my favorite, and then the clouds was my least favorite. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. Wow, real YouTuber. Anyway, we got these things sanded and then buffed. Got that nice mirror finish on them, and now I'm going to do a little bit of engraving on them with the good old triangle file. I just think that never gets old. I think that's so funny. Okay, so my mom just called me, so that's why the voiceover cut out. But anyway, back to the voiceover. I just had a funny little thought, because I feel like talking or doing this whole voiceover thing, it's basically like talking to a person, except no one is talking back to you. You're basically just talking at something, and which, like, okay, obviously, but it's kind of a weird concept. Anyway, that's like very similar, or at least like, because I like have no friends in Sweden, right? So I have to like go meet people, and I feel like the hardest part is always just like, at least for me, just walking up to someone and like introducing yourself and then talking to them, like, and then usually from there the conversation just flows, like random shit just happens and you just like say random things and you're like, oh yeah, like, oh, this and this, and like there's the usual like, oh, I'm from here and da 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 da, but hopefully like the conversation can be more interesting than that eventually. I mean, sometimes it's just, you know, of a dry person, and or you just like, you know, aren't on the same wavelength or whatever, that hippie crap. But, you know, I just find that I just thought that was interesting, because now that I've just been going on a walk and rambling at the phone, it's like, maybe the content isn't quite as good, but it's definitely, I feel like it should be more entertaining than just, oh, this is like what I'm doing and da-da-da-da-da. And I think once I get a feel for it more, I'll be able to like include details that people actually want to know, and then like of the process, and then exclude the boring stuff. I mean, it just depends on what the viewer is looking for, right? I mean, I don't want these videos necessarily to be like informative teaching videos by any means. Maybe someday, but I'm like, I don't think there is much of a viewer market for that. In addition, I'm mostly just after showing people these videos. Anyway, there's people walking on the path now, so I'll be right back. Quick interjection. So I walked past those people on the path, and I've gotten out to the lake. So I just thought I would share what my walk looks like. It's actually quite spectacular and beautiful. Hell yeah. We got the sand. So hopefully the waves don't come into the voiceover. We got the freaking little vindskyddet här. Oh, fy vad snygg. Oh, wow. Så mysigt. Anyway. Hope you enjoyed that little view of my walk. Anyway, continuing on with the walk and thoughts. I think this could really be a hit, you know. I think this is the new form of, I'm sure people have already done this, you know. There's nothing, you can't do anything new these days. I remember one of my teachers in high school said that to me. Probably one of the most like uninspiring things ever. He was like, you will never come up with anything new. Anything that has been discovered has already, it's like, dude, that's like literally, oh fuck. Okay, anyway, that was terrible, but yeah. Basically, he was just saying that everything that has ever been thought of anything that I can think of has already been thought of and done. So that's like some bullshit, uninspiring stuff, and just like also just not true. Maybe for me, I'm not saying I'm some sort of genius who's going to come up with something new, but to say that to a high school student is pretty uninspiring, man. What the hell? I mean, he's a fine dude. No hate or anything, but I do remember that pretty vividly, and just being like, wow, that's pretty lame. Anyway, I don't know what has been happening in the video because I'm just walking, but here we got the block sides. Oh yeah, so this is actually probably important to point out. That clip back there probably seemed pretty pointless, but I basically trimmed down the sides to put a slight wedge or cheese shape into it on the sides, because I just thought it felt really blocky, and I wanted it to feel like it was kind of coming out of the counter and tapering up, almost like tree roots growing down, just to make it look a little more organic and less blocky. And now we're carving these little things into it. Oh, some backstory on this too. This was pretty fun. Originally, I was just going to keep it a square. I wasn't even going to carve these things into it. And then me and some coworkers were talking, and they were like, yeah, like some of them thought it was like kind of cool to just keep it a big block, and like that's cool. But I think the consensus, and my opinion as well, was like, okay, this thing's way too blocky for 3 knives. It's just going to look like ridiculous on a counter. And so then I came up with this, and it's like basically very organic. I don't even know what you'd call it, but I love how they came out. I think it added so much to the entire set. I think it made it way more eye-catching, way more like creative, and all that, which is a great, actually, tying into or segue into what my relationship with work is like, which is 10 out of freaking 10, baby. Are you kidding me? Yeah, no, it's amazing. I love my job. I love what I do, which I'm sure I've already said before. But particularly, I had a rocky relationship with making something that I love into my job in the beginning for actually years. I stopped making knives for 2 years out of high school, just mostly because I didn't have a forge to work in anymore, or it was at home and I didn't want to be at home. But also just I didn't really have any interest in it. I didn't like the way that it made me feel. I had no creative juices. I didn't really want to do anything with my hands. And so finding this job and starting it up again was really difficult, because I was okay, I used to love doing this. I probably still do, right? And it was just weird and hard, because it's hard to make one of your passions into your job, because it can very, very easily become all about the money, which is what it was for me for a while. It was just a paycheck. It was okay, I need to turn some knives in. And, in today's society, you kind of do need money to a certain degree. I mean, at least the way that I live in Wyoming, I have yet to figure out, well, first of all, I just got a place to live in, so I didn't even have a freezer, but I have yet to figure out a way to gather my own food and, become completely self-sufficient. So I do need to make money, but I think when your focus becomes money in work, it totally, completely, and utterly obliterates the creative process and doing things out of love, because it just takes time to do things creatively, and to do things to the best of your ability just takes time. And for example, this block, I did the math, and I was making about $50 a day when I made this. It took me around 40 something days, and I won't tell you how much I got paid for it. I think it sold for $7,500, and I get a percentage of that because I work for a company, and they pay for all the materials. They pay for all the all the tools that I don't make, they pay for, but they pay for the materials for me to make those tools, all those things. They pay for everything, essentially, and sell it for me, and do all the paperwork, which is a great weight off of my shoulders. So this one was not economically efficient for me in any way, shape, or form. It's pretty much impossible. Well, no, that's not true. It's hard to live off of $50 a day, for sure, but it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I learned so much from this project, so it was definitely an inefficient project for me. If I were to do this again, I think I could easily do it in half the time. If I did it again, I could do it in probably maybe a third of the time. I think you start getting to the top of that curve, and it starts getting, you start gaining less and less time. But I have all the tools I need now. I learned a lot of things along the way, and so it just plain and simple would be more efficient if I did it again. Anyway, wow. Crazy how when you start rambling, you can get so sidetracked. Back to what I was originally talking about, which was my relationship with work. It switched for me, especially on this project, and I actually did the Ulu project after this one. But it was switched for me in a big way. And my mindset was pretty much a complete disregard for my economic state, which honestly worked out beautifully, because as soon as I completely forgot about that and just worked, I wanted to work. And so it no longer became a headache to go into work or took any effort, because I wanted to do it. I was excited about what I was making. Therefore, I started making more products and more efficiently, and worked harder during the day because I enjoyed it. So I think it's just a positive feedback loop, essentially. I think if you love what you do, you'll do it regardless of if you have to or not, because it becomes something you want to do instead of something that you have to do. So maybe it's like some human condition, or maybe that's just me and I'm a fucking idiot. I know there's some people that think work sucks. People hate work. Regardless of your job, it's going to suck. And I would agree with that to a certain degree, but I would change it. I think work will always be hard. I don't think work can ever be necessarily like easy. Maybe for a short period of time, you know, honeymoon phase of the relationship or whatever. But it's not that I wasn't working hard when I make these things, but the difference was that I wanted to do it instead of having to do it, which for me is like all the difference in the world. And just the feeling of producing something that you're proud of is worth, like, I don't need any money, you know? Like, I used to do this just for fun and not get paid. And the fact that I get paid for it is just amazing. It's like, it's the best. Yeah, that was a long tangent. Where are we in the video now? Oh yeah, look at that. We're refinishing the Nakiri side. Yeah, I scratched that one really bad. That sucked. I was so close. And then I scratched it and had to refinish it, which was annoying because once wood has a finish on it, it clogs up high grit sandpaper so much faster. Annoying. Anyway, we got that one refinished. Ooh, now we're putting the final laser. I actually changed my Maker's Mark. I haven't quite fallen in love with the whole lasering yet. I just like, I don't know, like it's cool, but I don't love the way it looks. I think gold inlay is so much more high-end and beautiful. I want to get to that at some point. Anyway, I think we're nearing the end of the project here, getting to the final clip, so I'm going to shut up. Let me know what you thought of this voiceover, and enjoy, again, this song that my friends made. Their Instagram will be linked in the description. I'll link my Instagram in the description, and enjoy these final shots of the project.
Strangers talking, I can't stop that, 'cause the word so I love you, you sure make me mad, 'cause how the truth ain't what it used to be. No, the truth ain't just you and me, now is it? And I'm sick and tired of hearing more damn names, 'cause though I love you, well, I know you're to blame for how the truth ain't what it used to be. No, the truth ain't just you and me, now is it? I can't go back, but I am not a perfect person, but I didn't go around with you in my back pocket. No, it's too late for you to say that you're sorry, for I already forgave you. I'm weak-hearted, honey. And strangers talking, here's what they say. How you held her hand while I was away. For now the truth ain't what it used to be. No, the truth ain't just you and me.
Well, my friend, you have reached the end of the video. Congratulations, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope there was good content, and I hope you found it entertaining. I'd love to hear what you thought in the comments. I'm not a big commenter myself, so I won't blame you if you don't, but I would love to hear it. It'd be super valuable information to have, I think. Particularly about the voiceover, and information that you would like to hear in there, and what you thought about the rambling content versus the more detail-oriented content. I think a mix of the two could be good. Maybe? I don't know. Let me know what you think. Anyway, I'm gonna soak up this last hour of sunlight that I get here. Sun sets at 2:30, and it's
1:30 here, or I think it sets at 3. Anyway, thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening, or day, depending on when you're watching this, I guess. I hope the food you're eating is good. If you're anything like me, I hope the food you're eating is good. And I'll see you in a few months on the next video.